We've got everybody checked in and ready to roll.
Go ahead, you're open to both.
3,
Put it over to the slate now.
2, 1. Take camera 1. Go, John.
Welcome to the Washington Post.
Welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm Leanne Caldwell.
I'm Yasmin Abu Talib.
I'm David Ignatius.
That was quite an intro. My gosh, we should probably just leave it right there.
I've hit the big time. Washington Post. I can go home and tell my parents what I did today.
Between Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Washington Post Live itself, we are now reaching hundreds of thousands of homes across all 50 states.
The power of this platform is it takes people into the world of ideas.
Audience members of Washington Post Live are part of the conversation.
I would like to ask the audience, how many of you knew before today's event that heart disease was the #1 killer of women? Okay, just me. Whether it's with cancer scientists or politicians.
This panel, I think, was originally called, 2 women against Putin. It really should be 3 women against Putin. So
the better way to get things done, as I've demonstrated, is by putting a group together and negotiating something that's good for both points of view.
So tell me what your plan is.
Oh, we have lots of plans.
I think Washington Post Live offers journalists like me a new way to do our job.
The work is hugely important.
A new way to connect with our audience.
Hello, Senator Schumer. Welcome to the Washington Post. This is going to be fun.
A new way to deepen our engagement with people who care about the Washington Post and our mission of gathering news.
The Washington Post also said that we were the best film of the year, so that was pretty cool as well.
Yes, well, I mean, the Washington Post doesn't lie, Jeffrey. You know that.
I'm still having a lot of fun, Kat. Like, a lot of fun.
And their individuality comes through more so than just their title.
Generally said, David, take off your tie.
Yes.
So, it's a rare appearance for me.
It's a tech conference. No one in the tech world wears ties, David.
So that is the lock from the night of the burglary.
Jeff Bezos bought it at an auction.
Right.
And we're trying to find out how much Bezos paid.
Right. Come back next week.
I'm so grateful to be on a platform like the Washington Post. I subscribe, I read, I love the Washington Post.
Thank you.
We need films like this. So thank you very much. Stephen, Lynn, it's been great to talk to you.
And I'm quite honored that the Washington Post should want to talk with me. Thank you.
I cannot thank you all enough.
Yeah! See what you guys are up against?
It felt like it needed some punctuation. Also, I want to get into the next reel.
Anyway. No, please come out.
No,
it's fine. That's the joy of this. All I have to do is just sit here, and they'll say really amusing things. And that is welcome to Washington Post Live. I think a very special edition of Washington Post Live. I'm David Shipley, the opinions editor here at the Post, and today we're going to talk about a new project that was just launched at Post Opinions called Who is Government? 7 writers go in search of the essential public servant, which is really exciting. And even more exciting is that we're joined by 3 of those writers right here on the stage. Immediately to my left, Mr. Michael Lewis, author of Going Infinite, about Sam Bankman-Fried, Moneyball, Liar's Poker, The Big Short. These are completely out of alphabetical order so that I can call special attention to Michael's book, The Fifth Risk, which we'll come to in a minute. Next to Michael, Geraldine Brooks, author of Horse, March, for which she won the Pulitzer Prize, and the forthcoming Memorial Days. And then Kamau Bell, producer, writer, comedian. You'll recognize him as the host and executive producer of the Emmy Award-winning CNN docuseries United Shades of America. He won a Peabody for his Showtime series on Bill Cosby, and he's the co-author of the New York Times bestselling book, Do the Work, an anti-racist activity book. Thank you all for coming, guys. And I will get us started with a question, but I really hope that this will be
I just feel like there's not enough applause. I just like, that's a lot of things.
Yeah.
That's a lot of
I'm sorry.
No,
sorry.
I appreciate, you know.
Come on, Washington Post.
You know, it's nice to be side by side with an actual professional. So I'm just grateful for that.
He just won some award, a Pulitzer.
And I think where we will start is that, you know, the three of you were thrown into this remarkable adventure to dive into the federal government and to come back with a story. And you came back with really different stories. And I think, Michael, why don't we
should explain where this project comes from.
Well, that's what you know, it is amazing.
You buried the lead.
Well, this is actually what we went over in the green room, because I told you first I was going to sort of set this up.
Yeah.
Then we were going to go to the fifth risk, where this project started. Yeah. And then you were going to talk about the story which published last week. So thank you for setting that up.
Oh, yeah.
And why don't we begin with the fifth risk, Michael Lewis?
All right, we'll start with so this subject matter generally, the civil service, is not a natural one for narrative nonfiction. I mean, for whatever reason, it's like these great undiscovered gems, and that I stumbled upon in a year into the Trump administration. And what had caught my eye was different from where we ended up. What caught my eye in the beginning was Trump firing his transition team right the day after he's elected. And you know, the Obama administration had prepared a couple thousand people. It had taken 6 months to try to explain to whoever was coming in what they did in the various federal agencies. And Obama had done that because Bush had done it for him and because it was required by law, and he was grateful. He thought what Bush had done for him was really important to how they got going in the beginning. And the fact that Trump didn't even bother sending people to the meetings, I thought, man, this is just great.
So there's just this room of work left
and nobody showed up, so that I could show up and talk to the people in the Department of Energy who were supposed to deliver the briefing about how the nuclear arsenal was maintained. And I'd be the first to hear it. I just thought there's like a natural, Trump has this gift for electrifying material. Like all of a sudden he made it interesting. And I did the series. It was a series of Vanity Fair where I almost picked them because nobody thought the audience might anticipate not being interested. The Department of Agriculture, the Department of Energy, Department of Commerce. And the things got so much attention that it was clear there was like an inefficiency in the market for journalism. That there was, so we glued them together into the fifth risk. But as I was working on it, my attention wandered from the agencies, which are interesting places, to the people, the permanent civil service. And there was just character after character. And I feel like I've now proven the point that you kind of like reach into the civil service and almost arbitrarily grab someone who's been there doing something for 30 years out of it.
And you had kind of a guide into the civil service.
Right there. Max Steyer.
Max Steyer.
Max Steyer.
What a surprise in Max.
So Max is kind of, so this all starts when I get Max on the phone when I'm just noodling around for Vanity Fair, not sure what I'm gonna do. And he says to me on the phone, you called the right place, I've got your next book. And I can't tell you how many people have told me that before. They're never right. There's always a dumb idea. And so I was kind of like, yeah. But in fact, Max delivered me my next book or two. And it was, so I had a jungle guide, in Max. And the easy way, the cheap way to find the story. Yeah. So just broadly, I've had so many experiences publishing books about different things. And sometimes I feel the books are underpraised, and sometimes I feel they're overpraised. Sometimes it's hard to connect the book to the audience, and sometimes it's just too easy. And in this case, it was too easy. It's like the country is hungering for an explanation of how the government works, an explanation of who these people are, beyond the noise, the political noise of the day. So it was clearly like, writers are gold miners, right? They're prospectors. You're kind of wandering around looking for nuggets. And these nuggets were just laying on the ground, there to be picked up. So we published The Fifth Risk, and you and I are on a hiking trail a couple of years ago, and we start talking about, like, maybe we should do this as a series. This is how this starts. And I said, can I go pick some writers I love, and we'll just parachute them into the government and let them find what they find and see what happens. And this is what happened.
And what were you looking for in the writers that you picked?
People who were fun was the first thing. Like, they're fun. They're really fun. And so are the other writers. Like people who, when I see their byline or their name on the screen, I get a little flutter in my heart. I know I want to do it. It's not dutiful. I don't have to read them. I want to read them. So it's just, and so that was the first criteria. And everybody said yes. That was the other interesting thing, is everybody kind of smelled that there was something worth doing here. And pretty much everybody, pretty quickly, it wasn't that hard to find stories. I was expecting more trouble. These are cats. You're herding cats, and it required nothing, because I do think there's this material that's crying out for storytellers to walk in and work with it.
And we'll come back to yours, but why don't we go to pass the ball around a little bit. Kamau, so Michael calls and
we meet in an art gallery in Oakland.
And he says, I have this project in mind. What did you think? What appealed about it? And then how did you settle on your character?
So it's funny. I met him at. I know people are impressed with Michael Lewis, but I'm impressed with Tabitha Soren, his wife. So I'm friendly with his wife and hadn't met him, and so me and my wife went to her art opening, and she's like, "Have you met Michael before?" And I was like, "No." And she's like, "I'll introduce you." So we met, and I remember the first thing he said to me when I think he was about to pitch the idea is like, "Are you a real writer?"
I didn't say that. I said, how much reporting have you done?
You did say that, and what I heard was, "Are you a real writer?" That's true. That's true. Because I remember being like, well, compared to you, no, but compared to most people. So later I was like, wait, I've written 2 books. Like it just sort of, for a second I forgot.
He does that to you.
No, it's a lot. I forgot when you did his resume, I was like, oh yeah, The Big Short. So I was like, I was intrigued by the offer, and then when it was like about anything in the federal government, I was just like, wait a minute, I think my goddaughter is a paralegal in the Department of Justice. And I was like, is the Department of Justice the federal government? So I Googled it, because I'm a big Googler.
Yeah.
And then I had to, so Olivia, who's right here, and she should get some applause.
Oh, wow.
So I think it was like you were home for the holidays, and we're in my kitchen, and I didn't want to pitch the whole idea, but I was like, tell me about working at the Department of Justice and the Antitrust Division. What's that about? Do you like it? I just sort of soft interviewed, and she immediately was like, oh, I really like it, and started to talk about how antitrust is important and how she didn't think she was going to like it, and she liked it. And I was like, okay, and I just sort of kept that in mind. And I talked to you, because I was like, is it okay that I write about my goddaughter? And you said yes, and then I reached out to Olivia, who I've known Olivia for most of her life. I am her godfather, but also I'm to her. Oh, look at that! Yeah, look at that! Oh, yeah. To her, I'm just her mom's goofy friend, basically. So, and she's seen me do things, and she's not impressed by any of my career and stuff like that. So I really did feel like I had to come to you and be like, I have this idea. Are you okay with this? I promise it will be good. And very quickly than I expected. Look at us. She was like all in on it, and so that made it so fun, because we haven't really spent this kind of time together, really, like a one-on-one. And it's been great. I mean, I like when I work when it's great for the work, but it's the best work when it's great for the work, and you get the benefit of doing the work, and it's great for you.
Yeah.
And so this is definitely one of those projects.
And unlike the other stories, most of the pieces we'll talk about, Geraldine's in a second, involve people who have been in federal service for a long time. And I think the beautiful thing about Olivia's story, which will be appearing, which will be primarily video, but also words and reporting, is that it's about someone starting out. It's about someone falling in love with this life. And all of these in their own way, and I hope you'll see as you read them, really are love stories. They're people who have chosen a very particular path and have gotten something amazing out of it, and we've gotten something far more incredible in return. Geraldine, I want to turn to you, and if it's okay with you, I want to read a section from your piece and have you respond.
Let me tell you about when.
Oh, tell me about the Michael call.
So
tell us about the Michael.
I had been walking around the house kind of crotchety, like, why doesn't Michael Lewis get off his ass and do that thing again with the government people? Because we really need it now. They're being so attacked. And then somebody dug up the J.D. Vance quote about sacking half the civil service and denigrating them. And I was a big fan of The Fifth Risk and the incredible people and stories that it surfaced. And then the phone rings, and it's Michael, and he says he's doing exactly that, and would I like to join in? So
would you do it for me, is basically what I said.
Yes.
And Geraldine, before you do this, what I loved, the spirit with which she attacked this thing. She said, I'm going to pick the part of the government people hate the most. Yeah. And it was the IRS. And it was the bravest thing. It was she was the bravest warrior.
And also the fastest rider.
Yep. So that's true. Yeah. Everybody we brought into this is prolific. I wasn't worried about like people delivering. Because they just all do the work. And she's now thought of, she's the Pulitzer Prize or National Book Award, I can't remember what you've got, but you got a novelist. People think of her as a historical novelist. But when we met, we were next door neighbors in London.
We shared a party wall.
And I watched her as a war correspondent. She's just like, she was a magnificent journalist. And not many people make that transition. But again, different kind of writer. I just thought, if she's just different, no two of the writers are really the same.
No, and every piece is there. I just want to read this one thing and then have you respond to it, Geraldine, and then we can get on. I'd like to talk about Chris, Mark, and Michael, your piece. Because it's this remarkable moment, the piece has been set up, and then you come to this paragraph, and you just, when you're an editor or a reader, when you feel something electric, you just kind of sit up. And then the piece in certain ways snaps together for you. And let me pause here for a moment. I'm a novelist. I make things up for a living. In my trade, it would be considered malpractice to make up Jared Koopman. This is her character. You just do not give your protagonist a set of attributes that includes black belts, vintage trucks, sommelier certificates, tattooed biceps, a wholesome all-American rural family, and a deeply consequential yet uncelebrated and under-remunerated career in global cybercrime. But as Mark Twain said, fiction is obliged to stick to the possibilities, truth isn't. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Jared?
Jared is an amazing guy. It was such a pleasure getting to know him. I started at the top because I wanted the pathway to be clear. So I asked to speak to Danny Warfel, who is the commissioner of the IRS, and he's a really great guy. He understands what he is up against in this job. When he gives a public presentation, he always starts it with a clip from The Simpsons, when Marge and Homer are barreling down Constitution Avenue, and Marge looks out the window and there is a building with big letters saying IRS, and she says, "Oh, look, the IRS," and Homer leans out the window and boos. So Danny Warfel describes the IRS as iconically unpopular. And so I knew that he would get what we were trying to do, and sure enough, he directed me right towards Jared. And at first, the first interview, we were just talking about the work, and I don't know how we got onto other things. And he made a remark. He said, "My wife says I have too many hobbies." And I said, "What?" And then he starts in, and it doesn't stop. This guy is a Renaissance guy, and I went and watched him teaching Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in his gym outside of Buffalo. That's him in his day job, tracking down cyber criminals by looking for digital scars in the world of the blockchain. And what I loved about doing this piece was that I had to learn so much new information myself to even what's a blockchain, So that was a great part of doing this story.
And this is the guy who helped bring down Silk Road, right?
He was leading the team. these things are multi-agency investigations, but it's almost always the IRS guy from his team that has found the crucial piece of evidence that unfolds the case. And in the case of Silk Road, it was his agent, Gary Alford, who had the insight that when you're a bad guy, you don't start out as a bad guy. There's a time before bad guydom. And if you look at that person's online presence before bad guydom, you look for them there. And he thought, well, the guy who started Silk Road would be interested in drugs, so he went on all these like 20-year-old drug forums and found an alias who started talking up Silk Road right at the point this global drug marketplace started up. And he also found somebody with the same online alias asking for coding information that was exactly what you would need if you were running Silk Road. And there was a digital scar. In that request for help, he had put his Gmail address. He'd gone back and deleted it, but somebody who responded had put Ross Ulbricht at gmail.com in the return email, and they had the name, and once they had the name, they could do the bust.
Wow. I mean, it takes a certain kind of focus to, all of your characters do that, and I was hoping, Michael, maybe, some people have probably already read your wonderful profile of Chris Mark. We have copies outside for
How many people
those
have
who
read?
haven't.
How many people have actually seen the Post series? So half, third.
Why don't you tell us a little bit?
Did you have any trouble getting to your characters? Like, did anybody get in the way?
The federal government? I mean, there's, when you hear the Washington Post is showing up, there's a history of that not being a good thing for the federal government. So for me, it was just trying to, I find myself in this position a lot because I did also work for CNN, trying to connect on a human level about like, here's who I am and here's what we're trying to do. And I would always say like, look, this is about my goddaughter. If I don't do well by her and therefore well by you, I'm not allowed to go to Thanksgiving anymore. So trust me that I'm doing this, that this is not some sort of like, this is a piece to highlight, not to expose.
Yeah, before we get to one of the things I have found over and over is that you run a gauntlet of communications people to get to the civil service, and the communications people are political people. And I can't tell you how many times with the Fifth Risk and this, when I was kind of noodling around on what to do, where I'd get some 28-year-old communications person who told me, no, you shouldn't be interested in what you're interested in, you should really write about this. Or we can only give you 20 minutes on the phone with that person. Or there were barriers, there's some barriers to entry. I'm amazed Geraldine was able to, that the IRS didn't just swat you away when you showed up, because they're used to being hated on, right? They're not used to people showing up wanting to do something nice to them.
Well, I think Danny Werfel's really insightful guy.
Right.
And it was very easy to explain this. It's for the opinion section. We have a strong point of view here. The strong point of view is we want to defend government. You describe yourself as iconically unpopular. Let me help you.
But I guess, would the three of you agree that government as it exists now does itself a disservice because it creates this moat, and on the other side of the moat is this magical city filled with stories that if you just walk down a corridor, you could be telling stories, filling the Washington Post pages for the next 20 years.
Yes, you can see why the moat exists. That too many people have come and done bad things, but it's a culture that has gotten just reflexively used to when they're being called out to be criticized rather than praised. And so the assumption is if you're calling to inspect, it's something bad happened, not something good.
And yet you guys all saw, and I think we've seen in the response to your piece, and then there was a wonderful essay report published by Casey Sepp today, focusing on the guy who oversees the national cemeteries.
This is such a beautiful piece. It's
people respond and it makes them happy. And so maybe you guys could explore that disconnect a little bit, because on the one hand, there's this thing that does unalloyed good, and there's still this blocking. I mean, why do you think we take such joy in finding these stories, in waking up and reading about Ron Stevens or about Chris Mark?
Should we talk a little bit?
Yeah, talk a little bit.
Explain how I found mine. So I recruit these talents, and without really thinking about what I'm going to do, I'm going to write one. I thought, oh shit, I've got to find a story, and so I did. I've done this twice now with Max. I asked for the list of Sammys nominees. So the Sammys are the Oscars for public service. The award ceremony is tomorrow night.
Kamau is hosting.
Kamau is hosting. And it's an Max, you got to work on that.
Yeah. I affectionately call Max the Mr. Rogers of public service.
Yeah, and it's an incredibly moving. I mean, it's you know, I've been to the Oscars too, and the Oscars, you get these people being celebrated, and everybody's watching, and they want the cameras on them. And really, what they did, it took them 2 months, and they go on to the next thing. And the Sammys is people who've done this something for 40 years, toiling in like without any kind of recognition, lots of risk, and they're so unused to attention. They just they're almost shocked that someone said, "Hey, you did a good job." And anyway, so the Partnership for Public Service has created this award, and has, you know, it's like pulling teeth, but they got the various agencies to nominate worthy recipients every year. And I read through these lists, and this year the list was like 550 people. I said, just send me the list, I'm gonna find someone on that list. And I'd done this once before. It was during the last government shutdown. I got him to give me a list of all the Sammys nominees who had been furloughed as non-essential workers, sent home without pay and told they didn't matter. But someone had nominated for a Sammy over the years, and there were like 1,000 people on this list. And that time I just plucked, it was alphabetical, I just took the first name on the list, Arthur A. Allen. And so, I'm gonna go with him. And it was an incredible story. I didn't have to go any further than this. And this time I thought, I mean, how am I gonna find a person here? And I was reading through it, and the way they describe it, you don't get a sense of the people. You get a sense, there are these names, there's this department, there's this problem they solve. And often the problem's quite interesting and dramatic, but no sense of the people. And I was paging through this list, and I get to this name, it says Christopher Mark. Help solve the problem that has killed more coal miners than any problem in history, the collapsing roofs collapsing inside coal mines. And then it's just said after that, a former coal miner.
Was a coal miner.
Yeah, was a coal miner, right. Was a coal miner. Thank you. Thank you, George. I appreciate that. You're sitting there on my shoulder.
That was good reporting.
Yeah, good reporting. So, yes. So I had, this thing happened, and I had this, all of a sudden I had a picture in my head, like there was a story here, and it was, how does a former coal miner get out of the coal mine and fix this, it was probably clearly a very technical problem. And I imagine that like he'd grown up in West Virginia, and he'd had some tragedy in the family, like came from a family of coal miners, like maybe his dad was killed by a falling roof, that there was some story there. And I cold called him out of the blue, and he was, I think he thought it was, he's here. He thought it was bizarre, I think, that I was getting in touch. He's like, why are you calling me? When I explained who I was, I think he had heard of Moneyball, or maybe read Moneyball, so it was, but he's, after I kind of like pitch him, like I just want to hear your story, he says, I grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, and my dad was a professor at the university. And I had been thinking of this series, like the meta idea for the series was we're gonna blow up the stereotype of the bureaucrat. People have a picture in their heads when they think government worker, deep state, whatever. And we're gonna show these, they're gonna be these portraits of people, and it's going to so violate the picture in your head that it's gonna replace it, or at least make it unstable. And I realized in that moment, he was doing that to me. I had a picture in my head of who I thought he was, and whatever it was very different. And then he goes on to tell me that, he starts to tell me about his father when I poked him a bit, and that his father had been a civil engineer who had repurposed a technology that he used to like stress test fighter planes and nuclear reactors, to stress test Gothic cathedrals, to show why the roofs didn't fall down on Gothic cathedrals. And I thought there's an amazing connection here. And then I just wanted to know. And he turned out, Chris Mark did not have to be an interesting person. He turned out to be an extremely interesting person. And he'd spent, 35 years with this very narrow problem, never really looking up from it and worrying about why he was so interested in it. And this problem, it sounds like a small problem, but it's a problem that killed 50,000 miners in the last century. Hundreds of thousands of people injured. Endless tragedy, endless grief, inflicted upon the weak and the powerless, the people who don't have any real say in how the world's organized, the unluckiest among us. And that this person who was clearly unbelievably talented and smart had ignored all the signals in the society to go get money, to go get fame, but instead had burrowed into this problem and solved it, I found incredibly moving. And it was just like, it kind of wrote itself. I mean, again, I felt like, pieces of writing, they should be judged, they're like Olympic dives. It's the quality of the execution, but it's also the difficulty of the dive. And this was just like putting myself on the edge of the board and just trying not to, just going straight in. It was so easy to do. And if you think about what we've done here, it's kind of, the forum you've provided, this is 12,000 words about a person who was in the shadows. And the responses we're getting to this it's like I wrote a piece about Princess Diana. It's like, it's got that kind of fluffiness. So something's wrong here in the world, that these opportunities shouldn't exist. There's some journalistic inefficiency that we are trying to correct. We're like Citadel Securities running in to drive the price of a stock that is somehow weirdly low back to where it should be. That's what it feels like.
Maybe we can start the rebound by asking Chris Mark to stand. If he's here.
Oh, wait a minute.
Is he here?
Giving him a...
There he is. Yeah. Yep. And tomorrow I will give him the Career Achievement Award.
Wait, does he know?
Just found out? Yeah. So he knows.
We're going to move on to a few audience questions. But before that, so how do we continue this? I guess there are two different roads that, I think we'd welcome your thoughts on. One, it's in the interest of the entire editorial team at the Post to develop a new generation of storytellers who will fill the Post with this. So what would be your advice to them? And then more broadly, it is so easy for this conversation to be subsumed by, the four names that dominate our life right now, Harris and Trump and, every other name at the top of the ticket, when in fact this whole world continues to operate and we should really care about it. So what thoughts do you have on building a pathway for us to, keep focused on it?
Hire a beat reporter and put them on the civil service hero beat.
Yeah.
It's funny, when you say that, the first thing I think about is Wei, who is Wei, who works here at the Post, who filmed, lit, did the audio, is editing, doing the graphic designs in the thing. And I just met him through you, and because you were like, who do you want to edit your piece? I was like, do you have somebody there? And I feel like I'm gonna get a lot of credit for stuff that Wei's doing, that I happily will share the credit. But to me, it was like, this guy is working at the Post right now, but has never been sort of allowed to unleash his power the way I think he's being allowed to unleash right now. So I think a lot of it is there's probably a lot more power in here that the Post even realizes. And if you put people in positions to where they can sort of follow their own nose and unleash their power, you're going to find a lot more than what you think is there.
Michael, any? Oh.
I think about it, how you extend it, because the characters that the writers have brought to life they're attracting a crowd. We can see it. The people want to read these stories. Once you've got the crowd, you've got to then explain that like, this isn't all a happy story. That they are a lot of what they're doing in spite of a really screwed up structure that they're in. Like, the incentives are bad. The incentive, for example, to hide rather than publicize what you do, because you just get in trouble if you stand up and are noticed. The way that, I mean, it's hard to imagine any big corporation succeeding being structured the way our federal agencies are structured, with new management coming in every couple of years who doesn't know anything about the operation, often with weird political views that they want to impose on the process.
That's like a Jerry Lewis movie.
But it's just like, it's amazing it even works.
Yeah.
And it's been so not refreshed. It needs to be refreshed. And so it's sort of like, we started the conversation, we're going to take it other places. And I think, but Geraldine's answer is right. There should be bodies, talented people on the problem. And I think we're showing it's like there's a market. Once you've demonstrated that there's a market, the Post should own this market. I mean, the Times should not own this market. The Post should own this market. If the Post is going to flourish in the future, it will have to own this market and not run away from it. I feel like the Republicans have their own attitude towards the federal government, but even the Democrats kind of shy away from selling it. Franklin Roosevelt didn't shy away from selling the federal government. No. He gave 988 press conferences on the federal government, and that needs to happen. It's almost like you need to force the civics lesson. Yes. And if you force it, people actually get interested. It sounds boring. It sounds so boring if you just say.
Well, I think you guys have shown that it isn't.
But yeah, I could say I wrote about a guy who works at the Department of Labor and he made coal mines safer, and you're asleep. But it's not that way. And if you force the civics lesson and you start to rekindle the interest, I mean, I think you start to talk about civics education in this country, and you could lead the way in that conversation. Thank you. And by the way, I'm announcing my candidacy.
A late entry into the presidential election.
No, Mayor of Berkeley.
Yeah. I heard about that.
Can I, before you?
Yeah, please.
Just a tiny example of what it's like working in these jobs when you could be in the private sector. Anybody who understands cryptocurrency the way these guys understand it, lavish remuneration, cushy benefits. These guys, they go out to Thailand, they do an incredibly consequential bust on this big time crook. They're sitting in the airport, the flight is delayed, they make a call to DC, can we get a day pass for a lounge? They're denied.
Yeah, right.
There's one more thing I want to say to this, because this is as someone who comes from the showbiz side of all this. Right now, storytelling is not cool in show business. It is only cool to tell the most sort of like clickbaity, headline grabby, true crimey, or celebrity filled, like, about a thing that you sort of like, yeah, I want to know about how Bon Jovi started, but okay. I'm not mad at that, but that's what people are leading with. It's either true crime or celebrities sort of are authoring their own tales. And so I believe there's got to be a place to tell stories like this, because there's so much of our media doesn't interested in telling us those stories because we don't click on those right away, or they don't think we do. So I think for someone to become the home of that kind of storytelling, you would, like you said, you would really have the market at a time where we need to connect people to these kinds of stories, because what else are we going to be as a nation if we don't actually know and understand each other?
And for the
Thank you, one person.
Please.
No, just that one person.
Yeah. No, but for the kids listening who do want to learn how to tell the stories, I mean, you guys are all supremely talented storytellers. Not everyone could bring Olivia to life. Not everybody could have you on the edge of your seat around Jared. Not everyone could have you spend 12,000 words on long wall mining. So what advice do you have for people who really do want to learn to fall into any situation and tell a story? Because the stories are there, the storytellers aren't always there.
I mean, I would like to, I'd hardly ever say, I'd like to push back slightly.
Yeah.
There is a ton of incredible storytellers on social media who are young people, TikTok, Instagram, but that storytelling isn't respected by media. And I think if you spend like an hour and look, you will find amazing stories that all they would need is more resources for those stories to be put out into the world. So I think certainly it's about how do you encourage the next generation? But I think it's also about our generation sort of not condescending to a new type of storytelling. And then on top of that, what I tell everybody when they ask me for advice, start today. Whatever you want to do, start today, because the sooner you start, the sooner you're going to get good at it. So that's my advice I always give people.
I would say you have to be willing to wear out a couple of things as a storyteller. Shoe leather and you're welcome. You really have to put in the time. You have to hang around until the thing happens. You can't just make it up, as you can as a novelist. Yeah. But if you're reporting, it's just hanging around till the person almost forgets you're there. And also, when they want to get rid of you, don't be got rid of. Just be that really annoying. Can't she take a hint?
They're doing the dishes, and I'm still here at the table. Michael?
What's the question?
Storytelling.
Like how to teach a young
Michael
person
Lewis's
how to be a...
5 lessons on falling into any situation and telling the story of it.
You're just going to let him give that away? He can't give that away.
Yeah, no.
It's a master
This is for subscribers.
It actually is a master.
I know. I know.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm allowed. I don't know if I'm allowed to answer the question.
How about 3 lessons?
No.
Let's
So it's not,
do
I don't think.
Yeah.
It's not lessons.
2. Okay. Tips.
So.
Seriously, because there's something really important that you guys have done. And if the aim here is to unearth as much of this as possible, the more generous we can be with sharing the tools, or at least...
All right, here's a tip.
Okay.
I'll give you one tip.
Finally.
This is a tip, and it's a tip to offset the vice of a lot of journalists, or journalism. So you've had this experience where you got a writer who's gone to write some story, and you go out for drinks with them, and they tell you about what they've unearthed, and you're riveted. It's just really interesting. They're talking to you, and you're all in. And then they go to sit down and write it, and they leave all the stuff they told you in the bar out because they think it's whatever, that they think they're writing, and they forget just how to grab you and say, listen to this, it's interesting. It's like, make sure it works in the bar first, and it is my tip. It's like, and don't lose that stuff, because that's what you're doing. You're trying to entertain someone. It's people forget. I think when they sit down and write, they start to focus on their own misery and their own effort and their own all this and their own self-seriousness and their own self-presentation. They forget they're asking someone to pick this up and spend energy and attention, which people will not do unless they're incentivized to do. So you got to make them want to do it. You got to make them want to read it. And you got to have that feeling. This person is going to want to hear that. And if you can't sit down with me and make me want to hear the story, you're probably not going to be able to write it. So that would be one tip.
That is fantastic. That was worth it.
Is that decent? Worth the
5? That was 5 in 1.
All right.
Let's go to we've just got a couple minutes, so I just want to go to a couple questions from the audience. And the first is for Geraldine, and this actually comes all the way from Marin in Australia.
Yay, go the Aussies.
And Marin asks, I've heard you say that you consider you have a duty of care when writing fiction about real people, even if they're dead. Were there any sensitivities you had to negotiate in this writing process, seeing that it was about real people in the present day?
That's a wonderful question, and I have to say, not really in this case, because I was so intrigued by what this man had accomplished, and I really just, it was just a case of relating some of the extraordinary things that he had done, and the unexpected element was that he's an accountant with the IRS. And yet he saved 23 actual children from rape and abuse. So how does an accountant with the IRS do that? I didn't really have a struggle in this case. In other reporting assignments in the past, and particularly as a foreign correspondent, yes, that's very front of mind, because what you write could put somebody's life at risk, and obviously that is an enormous responsibility. But in this case, I didn't feel it.
No, that was one. Thank you. Kamau, this is from Laura in Louisiana. And Laura asks, we got to some of this, but I'd love to hear more. After decades of being told that government is bad and or a waste of money, what's the best way to communicate to the American public its value?
I mean, I think the thing that I learned from this is that, like sitting across from Max and hearing him talk about public service, and you suddenly realize that whatever we think politics is at the headlines, and we're, tonight there's going to be a debate, most of it is people who are just trying to show up and do a good job. They're just trying to show, and you don't go into this level of politics for the money or the acclaim. You go into it because you want to be a good accountant, such a good accountant that you're saving kids from, what you say. So for me, that's why these stories are important, because you get to find out, like for me, when I found out that my goddaughter Olivia was going to be in a paralegal, I was like, yay, because I know she's a great person. And I know they need her there, but you don't know that. And so for me, it's about telling those stories and connecting people to the human element. So you can't just call it the swamp.
Yeah. And last question, we'll go to Mr. Michael Lewis. Michael Lewis, this comes to you from Tammy in North Carolina.
All right.
And Tammy has this to ask. Given the often negative perception of government bureaucracy, how do you choose which federal employees to profile, and what criteria do you use to ensure that their stories resonate with the broader public? Additionally, how do you hope these stories will impact public trust in government institutions?
She's thinking about it even more than I thought about it when I did my subjects. I mean, it was really, I did my best to have it kind of be a little arbitrary. This is a random sampling of what we have out there, kind of thing. It wasn't completely random because it was coming off of Sammy's list, but there are hundreds of people on those lists. So the criteria actually isn't, I'm not curating them for anything except I'm interested. So I call Chris Mark, I get off the phone, I'm interested. I go to Pittsburgh to see him. We go spend 2 days driving around the West Virginia coalfields. I never lose interest. I pester him for the next few months, and I'm sure he got tired of me. I'm sure I was the character that Geraldine just described. Like, when is this guy going to go away? But I never lost interest. And when I don't, that's just the key. If I don't lose interest, the reader won't lose interest. If I do lose interest, there's no hope. So, and the point is that I've just never found one of these characters who I've lost interest in. I mean, I've now had a bunch of them. So I think that there's no great science to it. What do I hope it achieves? I said it before. It's exploding this dumb stereotype of government worker. It's such a lazy approach to thinking about how the government works and who the government is. I want to just unsettle that picture in people's mind so they stop a sec before they start talking about the swamp or the deep state or useless bureaucrats. Because you're talking about some of the best among us. You're talking about, and this is the thing that has, we have not said this in any of these pieces. We've not cited, did not say this in The Fifth Risk. But one of the reasons these pieces resonate is you're watching people who have learned how to lead meaningful lives. There's such meaning in these lives. They don't have the problem of the Goldman Sachs investment banker, where they have to kind of explain to themselves why they're doing what they're doing. They know why they're doing what they're doing. And it's when they're laying on their deathbed and they look back, they're not gonna have regrets about how they lived their lives. And there's a lot of people in our society, especially at the top of the society, who can't say that. And I think that there's isn't it nice to make someone important who's figured out the trick of living, how to make it meaningful. So that's what I'm hoping to do.
I would like to just pause on that for 30 seconds and let that sink in, because that's, I think, probably a lot of the force of the series and the reaction comes exactly from that space where it is a recipe for living a good life.
Yep. For other people, you're living for others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, three people with whom I could never lose interest in. Michael, Geraldine, Kamau. Thank you very much.
Let's what happened for David Shipley?
No,
he put it all together.
No. But But a reminder that we will be publishing many more of these pieces over the next few weeks. Geraldine's and Kamau's, you've seen Casey, Sarah Vowell, John Lanchester, Dave Eggers. There are some treats in store. And just before we close, everyone here, I hope, was handed a note card and given a pen to answer what should more Americans know about who government is and what it does. A few of you already handed your responses back in, and I'm just going to read one now before we close. This is, I'm just seeing where my eyes work best. This is from Austin. And the Post wants to know what should more Americans know about who government is and what it does. Share your thoughts and it will be published as a letter to the editor. Government is the tool we use to tackle shared problems. It is made of people and therefore has all the things that are amazing about people and all of our flaws too. Improvement in government is exactly like how we seek to improve ourselves, and public servants devote their career to that goal. And I can't think of a better way to end. If you have more letters, please hand them to Alyssa Rosenberg, our fabulous letters editor, who will be out there with a beautiful blue mailbox. And also please be sure to learn more about how you can engage with our letters to the editor page. And you can also email letters to letters@washingtonpost.com. And most of all, thank you for coming today. Thank you for reading this work. Thank you for celebrating these writers. I'm David Shipley. Have a great evening. Thank you. Pleasure.